Chapter 20. The Silver Arrow. When the sheriff's wife heard about her husband's adventure with Robin Hood, and how he had made his promise, she was furious. The sheriff told her how he had been trapped, and how lucky he was to be still alive. But it was of no use. His wife would not listen to his excuses, and she did not try to hide from her husband her angry thoughts about him. "You know very well that Robin Hood is wanted for murder," she cried, "yet you continue to leave him alone as if he were your friend." "But I gave him my word that I would leave him alone," replied the sheriff. "He will not leave you alone." "I cannot go back on my word," insisted the sheriff. "But if I could show you a way to get around your promise," said his wife craftily, "what would you say to that?" "If I could set Robin Hood free in the same way that he set me free, I should consider that we were quits," was the sheriff's answer. The wife had a plan in her mind, and she told the sheriff of it. "All you have to do is announce a great shooting match in Nottingham. You can rely upon it that Robin Hood will be there if the prize is great enough. You know yourself that there is not a finer archer in the country." "That's true," admitted the sheriff, "but I still cannot see how that will free me from my obligations." "Then listen," went on his wife. "If Robin Hood does come, he is sure to win the contest. Let him see that you recognize him, and when he comes to receive his prize, secretly order your men to attack him, and you yourself allow him to escape before they reach him. You will then be quits." "It is a cunning plan," admitted the sheriff. "Then after that I can set out to capture the outlaw and bring him to justice." The sheriff made sure that the notices for the shooting contest were posted all over the town. The news of the match spread very quickly, as he had intended, and it was not long before it reached the ears of Robin himself. When Robin learned that the prize was to be a silver arrow, he made up his mind at once. "The silver arrow will be a fine present for Marion," he announced to his men. "Nothing will keep me from entering the contest." His men tried to turn him from his bold purpose. They knew that once he was seen in Nottingham he would be captured. "Has not the sheriff given me his promise?" asked Robin. "He will not go back on his word." The outlaws were not so sure about the sheriff's honesty as was their leader, but Robin told them he would go in disguise just in case there was any risk. "On second thoughts," laughed Robin, "I think we must all enter the contest." On the day of the match, Robin and his men, all in disguise, marched towards Nottingham. Each carried a bow and a number of arrows. As they neared the town, they saw that the townspeople were pouring into the meadow where the great shooting match was to be held. At one end of the meadow a wand made of willow was standing up in the ground. This was to be the target. Near this target special stands had been put up so that the townspeople could have a full view of the competition. Robin's men mingled with the crowd who were going to shoot, and as there were 800 archers taking part, they were easily overlooked. On the way to the match, Robin decided that only the best of his men would take part in the competition. The remainder would stand by in case of need. It took a long time for the many contestants to shoot. Gradually the failures dropped out, and at last only 5 were left in the match. All these 5, unknown to the townsfolk, were members of Robin's band. The sheriff looked on from his seat in the stand. "All a waste of time," he muttered to himself. "The great Robin Hood is afraid to show his face here. My stupid wife's plan has just turned out to be a waste of time and expense." He had no suspicion that the outlaw was not many paces from him. The 5 men left in the match were now going to take their final shots. One of them fell out, and then there were 4. The 4 became 3, and the 3 2, until amid cheers Robin was declared the winner. He stepped up to receive the prize. As the sheriff held out the silver arrow to this unknown marksman, he suddenly recognized the outlaw. Quivering with excitement, he turned round to whisper something to one of his men, the secret signal that would set the soldiers against Robin Hood. Then he turned back to the outlaw and presented him with the silver arrow. Suddenly one of the sheriff's men cried out, "'Tis Robin Hood, the outlaw! Arrest him!" Soldiers began to swarm towards the stand where Robin stood with the sheriff. The sheriff whispered in Robin's ear, "Go, Robin, whilst you may. I have kept my promise, but this makes us quits." Robin saw through the plan at once. He brought out his horn from its hiding place among his clothes and put it to his lips. Immediately the meadow swarmed with men from Sherwood Forest. They rushed towards the sheriff's soldiers, and a great battle began. Robin fought his way to the head of his band. Soon the sheriff's men were driven back, and Robin decided that it was time for his men to make their escape into the forest. He called to them. "To the forest, men," he cried. "Leave these varlets to lick their wounds." The men turned and ran towards the forest, in whose secret depths lay safety from pursuit. They had not passed far out of Nottingham when a chance arrow from one of the sheriff's men embedded itself in Little John's knee. He fell at once. Robin came across the giant as he was trying to pluck the arrow out. "Pray do not wait for me, master," said Little John. "Stab me so that I shall not die by the rope, then leave me." Robin took no notice of his faithful friend's pleas. He called Much the miller's son, and together they lifted Little John and staggered on with him. But the sheriff's men were hot on the heels of the outlaws, and Robin knew that it would not be long before the 3 of them were overtaken. "We've only one chance," he said to Much the miller's son. "We must make for Sir Richard of Lee's castle. We could never get as far as the forest before the sheriff's men overtook us. Sir Richard will give us shelter, I know." They made their way to the great castle that stood in the distance. Stumbling bravely across fields, they arrived with their burden only a short time before the sheriff's men. Sir Richard welcomed them. "There is no time to be lost," said Sir Richard. "I can see the sheriff's men in the distance." "Then help us, Sir Richard, to get Little John to safety." In a very short time the 3 outlaws were resting in Sir Richard's castle. The sheriff's men knew that it would be useless to try and force their way into the great stone fortress. They gave up the chase and returned to Nottingham. Robin showed his silver arrow prize to Sir Richard, who said, Maid Marian will be very proud of this, and of you." When at last Robin returned to the forest, he presented the prize to his wife. Maid Marian treasured it always, and seldom allowed it out of her sight. End of chapter 20.